Welcome to the FF Forge. I'm Steve, and it's time for the Saturday report where I will be going over all the most latest up-to-date practice reports, so the ins, outs, doubtfuls, questionable guys, as well as I added a little bit of a new section in here, just kind of the most interesting news reports that are going on right now, top, hot stories, I guess, ones that I found interesting and relevant to the fantasy world, as well as, of course, the Start 6 section, the Steel, Stock, Scrap portion, and you can find each section in the time-stamped below. Also, you can find all of my rankings up at www.theffforge.com. There is a link down in the description below, and there are also projections for each position. There's floors, ceilings, and then expected ranges. Those are explained to some extent in previous videos and also up on the website. So let's just get right moving to get to the good stuff the quickest. As far as the injury report goes, we'll just jump right down here to the questionable guys. Dak Prescott, Mac Jones, and Russell Wilson are all questionable. Of course, Mac Jones, Dak Prescott are on the doubtful side of questionable, not expected to be playing, just as Baker Mayfield's not expected to be playing. And Russell Wilson, all expectations are that he is playing. There hasn't really been any indication that he's not this week, but definitely something to just keep an eye on in case. Moving on to the running back position. James Conner was declared out maybe even as early as Thursday, and so that will leave Eno Benjamin and Keontae Ingram. I do not have Keontae Ingram currently ranked. I'm not confident enough in what that may look like this week, so if you were extremely desperate and you're in the realm of you're looking at players who you're just hoping for them to fall into the end zone, I do think that this is a matchup for Arizona going up against Seattle, where Keontae Ingram would have a decent shot of that, especially with Eno Benjamin being the starter. He's not exactly as powerful as Keontae Ingram is as a runner. So that is something to keep in mind, but like I said, not ranked. Then Darrell Williams is also out. That is why Keontae Ingram will be getting brought up from the practice squad. He is a rookie 6th round pick. As you know, running backs, you can pretty much move that round. He's like a normal 5th round pick for most positions. Then Rashad Penny, we all expected to be out. And Cam Akers was a surprise out. That will be more information on that in the news section of this video. Then going on to the questionable players, Melvin Gordon, I don't think there's a whole lot of concern for him, but that is a Monday game, and today, Saturday, there should be a practice report that will give us a little more confidence or a little bit more concern as to if he is playing or not, but I'm expecting him to play. It's the same injury he had going into last week, but that doesn't mean it's a for sure thing. Damian Harris is not a for sure thing to be out this week. He is being listed as questionable. The expectations are that he will not be playing. Jonathan Taylor practiced in a limited fashion all week, so there are still question marks with that. It's not as sure of a thing as I thought earlier in the week. Then Nyheim Hines, I believe it's pretty much a sure thing. He put in a full practice on Friday, no red shirt, meaning he's able to have contact. Of course, that happened with, I think, Isaiah McKenzie maybe last week, and so I thought he was going to play because of that news, and then he didn't, so not a for sure thing, but I believe the expectations are that Nyheim Hines will be playing. Raheem Mostert, questionable. Alexander Madison, questionable. And Saquon Barkley did show up on the injury report this week at some point, but he is in. Moving on to the wide receivers, Rashad Bateman was ruled out. Michael Thomas has been ruled out. Kadarius Toney out. Same with Kenny Golladay, Jarvis Landry. Doubtful is going to be Julio Jones. Did report earlier in the week that their team said something about they're looking for the long term with Julio Jones. The second half of the season is when things will be more important as far as having him available and hopefully at full health. So for at least 3 weeks. So that's a true doubtful right there. Wan'Dale Robinson is expected to be playing, but he will only be sprinkled in. He is somebody that if you want to get ahead of the curve, not a terrible stash to pick up right before game time. Keenan Allen is very iffy, and that is a Monday night game. So if you are holding on to hope for Keenan Allen, some names that you might want to make sure that are available if you have no other backup options would be Mike Boone and Joshua Kelly, and that's about it for him as far as playable guys in those games. Then Chris Olave is likely. CeeDee Lamb was a Friday add to the injury report, and that is a Sunday night game. So there is some additional concern there with the late add in the week. I do believe that the coaching staff has said that they expect him to be playing. Just be prepared in case something were to happen. You don't want to zero in there. So, is Michael Gallup, Mike Boone available on the wire? Noah Brown, Josh Kelly, Kenneth Gainwell, they probably are available, and at least one of them almost certainly is. So just be prepared that these are the names that you might have to fall back on if CeeDee Lamb were to not play. Other than that, I don't think there's really too many names that should be available that you'd want to throw out there. Then T. Higgins is doubtful for this game, so things aren't looking good for that. And then Zay Jones, Cooper Kupp, Jacoby Myers, Marvin Jones, all questionable. Robbie Anderson had an illness that caused him to be on the injury report Friday. Didn't miss practice there. Tyreek Hill, Tyler Lockett, Isaiah McKenzie, all have been ruled as in for this week. Pat Freiermuth was ruled out for the tight end position, and then Kyle Pitts, Tyler Higbee, Hayden Hurst are all questionable. I haven't heard anything against Kyle Pitts. I haven't heard much news for Kyle Pitts this week, so I'm still leaning towards he's probably playing, but I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing that I haven't heard much there. And then Tyler Higbee, Hayden Hurst, questionable. Just, be prepared. Keep an eye on that. And Dawson Knox and Cameron Brate were both ruled as in this week, as well as Robbie Gould was ruled in. Harrison Butker, I don't think has been ruled as in, but he was brought back onto he's almost certainly going to be playing again this week. That is it for all of the injury reports. Moving on to the headlines. As far as New England goes, it doesn't sound like Pierre Strong Jr. has Bill Belichick's trust yet. That is third-round rookie James White-ish type running back. Probably a little bit more athletic than James White. Just a heads up for the future. As far as Ramondre Stevenson goes this week, there isn't much competition coming in unless Damian Harris were to be ruled active. Even then, Damian Harris will probably be in a limited fashion at least. So, Ramondre Stevenson is an absolute must-start. If Damian Harris plays, I would say still a must-start. Just not as absolute as before. Another headline here. Cam Akers. Things came out yesterday, surprisingly, that ruled out for the game, going through some issue, a little oddly worded, some issues. So it could be some personal issues, or it could be some sort of inconsolable differences between him and the team. Don't know what to tell you to do with Cam Akers. You should be able to put him in an IR spot if you have that this week, but I don't think it's out of the. I would say he's droppable if there's a high upside type of waiver wire option that you would like to add onto your team. It might be worth taking the risk there, because I don't know how much of a risk it actually is. Kyren Williams is the rookie there in Los Angeles for the Rams, who will be coming back at some point. His injury happened 4 weeks ago. The original report on it was that it's a 6 to 8 week injury recovery for that type of injury. Best case scenario, that's still 2 weeks out, something to keep on the radar. He'll be on the list for waivers next week. I'm absolutely certain of that. Next report here, there's almost no way that Justin Fields makes it through the season with that O-line. This is a self-report. I made that report right now. Oh, the poor guy just got beat up on Thursday. There's not a whole lot to take away from that game. Christian Watson of the Green Bay Packers, rookie, early second round pick, may be getting shut down for the entirety of the season with his hamstring issues. It absolutely sucks, but as a Green Bay Packer fan, I almost had wished coming into the season it was pretty clear that his hamstring wasn't healing fully, and I wouldn't mind an early season IR for him, but they gave it a go, and it's looking questionable. It's looking iffy right now for his season. Unfortunately, Then Gus Edwards is getting close to a return via the coaching staff, so that is what it is. He's on my waiver wire report. You can find out more of what I had to say on him there, I think. I don't know how much I went into that. Then 4 starters on the 49ers defense have already been ruled out. And when I say starters, I mean names that you should be pretty familiar with if you follow football at all. And then Nick Bosa is still listed as questionable, not a sure thing to be playing this weekend. Just a heads up as far as that defense goes, and anybody playing them this week? Might be sneaky starts. Or you might get some sneaky good production out of those starters. So just be aware of that, but I wouldn't take it to the max. The 49ers have done a good job of finding replacements and not losing too much on the defensive side of the ball when they've had to replace several guys in the past. Then a little report from Najee Harris. He said that he had been playing with a plate of sorts in the shoe of his injured foot to the Liz Frank injury, and that was just removed earlier this week. So maybe that'll help his running, help his production going forward, which Najee owners would love to know and see and happen. And then the last report here is Tua Tagovailoa. I'll never say it right the first time around. He was a full participant at practice on Friday. I would think that's a pretty big improvement for his situation. On to the fun portion, on to the start, sit, the steal, stock, scrap, and just heads up. I should say only for the quarterbacks, because I have all of the quarterbacks ranked, and it doesn't really mess with things too much. These are rankings for the rest of the week, so did remove the Thursday night games from those rankings, so some players move up a little bit due to that. And then the DFS value plays are based on FanDuel pricing, and there is no specific reason for that other than the website that I have begun to use for that. It is nice and handy for organizing things, so I can look at a nice list and pick my value plays. And I do go for like the absolute most value play of value plays is my strategy, with a little bit of confidence factored in, but only so much. Like I'm going for the guys that you have to pay at least 4 that I think could get you a good week. But that doesn't always mean I expect them to get you a good week, just that I kind of do at the worst case scenario. So let's start off with the tight end steals, and right up top next to the name you will see I gave myself a little grading from my results last week for each of these. And I did better than I thought. I thought it was going to be all bad. So I basically have good, bad, mixed, and then there's going to be a not applicable due to basically injury or guys that maybe I had on there that were questionable and didn't end up playing. So, I did my best to be unbiased with these gradings, but there was some subjectivity to them, and I just wanted to keep it quick. So, for the steals, I did good last week. Starting off for this week, I have Kyle Pitts ranked 8th. The ECR on him is 16, so I'm 8 spots ahead of the ECR and going up against San Fran, that defense that we just talked about. So that does give me a little bit of hope, but I had him ranked this high before I knew like all of those players probably weren't going to be playing this week. I think Kyle Pitts should be started in most scenarios. Of course, look at the rankings, because the thing about Kyle Pitts owners is they pretty early on were going for some of the higher end tight end replacement options. I'm going to have to let my cat in here in a second. So a lot of times they do have some of those Tyler Higbees that are still ranked higher. I'll be right back. I have Will Dissly ranked 13th, 4 spots ahead of the ECR at 17, going up against Arizona this week. I'm kind of a big fan of how this game might end up going. So Arizona's probably going to put a decent amount of pressure up on Geno Smith. And if you've heard my analysis since, I think it was after week 1 on Will Dissly, I believed a lot of where his production this season would come from would be on broken plays, and just because he blocks a person and then releases off of them, goes out for a route, gets into the open, and finds an open spot and is forgotten about by the defense. So I like that that could be the thing that happens a few times this week for Dissly. So going out on a bit of a limb there, putting him up at 13. My projections liked him a bit this week, so probably liked his chances at a touchdown or maybe even more than one touchdown. I don't exactly know what the projections end up calculating there. That is it for my steals. Kyle Pitts and Will Dissly. Then for the stocks, last week I gave you a mixed set of stocks, and I do believe George Kittle was right here last week. So he was a stock I said to stick with it. Should be the squeaky Kittle game, and it was not. So I'm not going to go that far. Look, I have him at 12. The ECR is 6. So I actually have him lower than the ECR. It did move him up ahead of Will Dissly just out of the fact that we're playing up against Atlanta this week. It's a pretty juicy matchup. Also, expecting that San Fran may not be able to lean on the run game as much as they usually want to. Not necessarily because of the opponent, but because their defense might struggle in this game against Atlanta. Lucky for them, they are playing Atlanta, so they might not. It could be a total run game. But, it won't be shocking if they have to pass a few more times than they're used to. And so once again, if you're a Kittle owner, you probably are in a similar situation to the Kyle Pitts owners. You probably have some pretty good backup tight ends, but you may not. And for the most part, just stay the faith, live by the Kittle, die by the Kittle. So for Hayden Hurst, I have him right at the same spot as ECR. Both of us have him at 9. Going up against New Orleans, not really a great matchup, but it is a tight end wasteland. A tight end wasteland. So we can, the thing here is projections are still liking him more than others. Obviously, ignore the fact that it's a terrible matchup this week and go with him if he is your highest ranked option. It can get worse. So, moving on to these scraps for the tight ends. Have Irv Smith ranked at 19 and the ECR on him. So, I'm 7 spots behind 19. ECR is 12. If I haven't explained, the ECR is the expert consensus rankings found on fantasypros.com. Took those last night, Friday evening, and went through and did this. Going up against Irv Smith would not be going up against Minnesota. Going up against Miami this week. And I'm still kind of confused as to why he's so high up on the ECR. If it's because they're playing Miami because it's a high-scoring offense, but they got Skylar Thompson going this week again. So I don't know. I don't get it. I mean, whatever. That's how I have them ranked. I'm not going out onto the waiver wire and getting rid of a Hayden Hurst they wouldn't suggest that, but I'm happy to play my Will Dissly and stick with him over my Irv Smith play. Then Robert Tonyan, I have it ranked 18th. The ECR in him is 13, so I am 5 spots lower than the ECR. Going up against the New York Jets this week, I think that has a lot to do with it, seeing New York Jets on the other side. And I can understand that. I mean, it's not a terrible matchup there. One that, we're just expecting every week for this Green Bay offense to get better. But Robert Tonyan is not exactly the one I'd bank on. I would like to mention right now that when you get into these tight ends, from the 8th, 9th best tight end to somewhere right around Robert Tonyan, around 18, so that group of 10 or so tight ends that are back-end options each and every week. My suggestion is to just play the odds. Don't play the matchups. Unless you have 2 of them on your team, then play the matchups. But play the odds as far as just keeping 1 dude on your team or 2 and rolling with it. Because I did a lot of analysis this offseason on the production and the amount of times that players within certain ranges of season-long output, how often they have good games, great games, those kinds of things. Tight end 1 games, tight end 6 games, and the ultimate consensus for the tight end was just basically that there's like a 1 in 3 shot that they're gonna have a good week once you get into that that main group of tight ends that we all hate so much. So that is just my advice there. I don't suggest going out on the waivers each and every week and trying to play the guy who just had a touchdown the previous week, because odds are they won't have a touchdown this week. Then the DFS value play, I have 2 of them for the tight end position. You're welcome. I have Dawson Knox going up against Kansas City, so it's just one of those things where I don't want to miss on that potential upside, Heck, 3 touchdowns isn't even out of the question in this kind of matchup. 1 touchdown is definitely a possibility, and 2 touchdowns isn't. He probably has some of the highest odds for 2 touchdowns out of all of the tight ends this week, except for like the tight end on the opposite side of the ball there. Then Daniel Bellinger going up against Baltimore. Still haven't quite figured it out there in the secondary in Baltimore. They are not getting back one of their main pieces this week. Daniel Bellinger is a rookie that's getting, I don't know how much more involved statistically other than like targets as of late and receptions that Daniel Bellinger is getting, but it's a nice matchup this week for him. Pretty red hot against my thermometer, my thermostat for the matchup for him. So nice, super cheap option if you want to go even less expensive than Dawson Knox. But really do like that upside for Dawson, and he's at a good price this week. Then moving on to the quarterbacks. Oh, how did I do for the scraps? Also had mixed results there for the scraps. And I think Robert Tonyan was the one I got right last week, and then I had somebody here who did good. Hayden Hurst. Hayden Hurst last week I think I screwed up on. So moving on to the quarterbacks. The steals. I've done bad on the steals for quarterback all season long. Promise that will get better. Let's start off with Jimmy Garoppolo here. I have him 4 spots ahead of the ECR. I have him ranked 12th, and the ECR on him is 16, going up against Atlanta. So really do like that matchup. Once again, do like the factor that their defense may struggle a little bit this week or not be as dominant as they've been, as a plus for a Jimmy Garoppolo to, maybe have 290 passing yards. So, come close to 300 or around 300 is, I think, a possibility, in part because of that. Makes it more likely, let's say. What I want to say, though, about Jimmy Garoppolo here at 12 is there are guys with better ceilings that I have ranked behind him. For instance, Daniel Jones. If you're looking for a ceiling play, I'd go Daniel Jones over Jimmy Garoppolo, just like ECR has him higher, too. But this is a safety play here. I really don't. I mean, San Francisco could just rush in all the touchdowns, and then you get kind of a game from Jimmy Garoppolo. He usually manages, in one way or another, to have a decent game, worst case scenario, and I think this will be a week where he gives you about 20 points. So, not the ceiling play, but he's a pretty safe option in my opinion this week. Then Daniel Jones is the slightly less safe option at 13. The ECR on him is 15, so I'm 2 spots higher than the ECR. Going up against Baltimore, so just talked about that matchup a little bit with Daniel Bellinger. I like the upside here. So once again, if you're looking for the upside play on your waiver wire, I'd go Daniel Jones over Jimmy Garoppolo. If you had the Washington defense playing, which I ended up going Chicago over them, I was going to play Washington all along. But if you had Washington's defense going, and so you're feeling pretty good, not a beastly game from them, but 12 points or so, depending on your scoring format, you should have gotten a good amount of points there to where you just don't want to flop anywhere else on your roster, and you're feeling pretty good about the week. Then go with Jimmy Garoppolo. For these stocks last week, I did good with these, and so I have Russell Wilson as my 15th ranked. The ECR is 13, going against the Chargers. And I'm just here to say, as long as he's playing, of course, there is a small chance that he doesn't play. You don't need to go out and get someone to replace Russell Wilson last minute. Don't get too nervous about it. This should be a good matchup for him. There's a lot of upside in this game. The injury is concerning for sure, but the experts and I think to just roll with it. Then Aaron Rodgers, ECR on him's 11. I have him 11 going against the New York Jets. Don't love this, but this is the quarterback landscape right now, and you got to think just an average day for Aaron Rodgers against the New York Jets should be a fine day in the worst case scenario. If you're still playing Aaron Rodgers, this isn't the week to stop playing him. Basically what it comes down to. Then let's move on to these scraps, where I had mixed results last week. Matt Stafford, I have ranked 14th. The ECR on him is 12, so I have 2 spots behind the ECR going up against Carolina. So, ECR is saying that he's in starting spot. I'm sure his start percentage, just like last week, is relatively low, so you don't need me to tell you. Sit him if you can. Nice matchup this week going up against Carolina. Not an excellent smash matchup. That's just kind of a good one. Then Trevor Lawrence at 18 on my rankings. Oh, God. Ugh. Saturday morning. So Trevor Lawrence in at 18. ECR on him is 14. I am 4 spots lower than the ECR. Going up against Indianapolis. It's not a smash lineup. I do believe he was even higher earlier in the week. I was confused by that. It starts to make a little bit of sense around here. Trevor Lawrence is around the back end of guys that I wrote on my website that, I'm not going out of my way to replace them this week if I don't have to, or, if it's going to hurt my roster in other ways. He's probably a guy I want to keep, especially if you're solo quarterbacking him in one league, or he's your QB2 and there's an option on the waiver wire. I think there's still a lot of upside for him this season that I don't want to lose out on. Then the DFS value play for me at quarterback this week is going to be Zach Wilson. Not costing a whole lot. There's still a good ceiling there for him this week going up against Green Bay. Moving on to the running backs, and we'll start off with the steals, the guys that I am above ECR on, and I had mixed results at the running back position last week. So this week, we're going to start off with Darrell Henderson. I have him ranked 14th. He has only started in 7% of ESPN leagues right now. My roster included that he is not a starter on yet, but I almost have no starters right now, except for my Chicago D. Then the ECR on him is 29, so I'm 15 spots higher. Don't expect that to continue. I think I looked at it this morning. He was up to 27, so he should rise. That news was kind of mid to late day yesterday on a Friday for Darrell Henderson, so I assume at some point today a lot of rankers will be moving him up. I don't know how far up, so I decided to end up keeping him on here, and my rankings really liked him. I gave him, I think a little bit less work than he had in week 1. So this is a very similar situation, I think, than to what happened in week 1. A late surprise to the running back core. So you just kind of stick with maybe a little bit of a basic game plan, but you stick with the game plan that you have for this player going up against Denver. So not the juiciest of matchups. That said, my thermostat, my temperature gauge on Darrell Henderson is still in the red, just a little bit over that neutral white line. So there are enough factors working in favor of Darrell Henderson that my temperature gauge doesn't mind this matchup so much. I'm struggling on whether to play him or Kenneth Walker this week, because I currently have him ranked higher than Kenneth Walker by, I think, a spot. Feel free to give me your opinion down below. I know it's probably Kenneth Walker. Then for the other steal, I have Eno Benjamin here. He is ranked 13th in my rankings, 19th by the ECR, so I have him 6 spots ahead of ECR. He's being started in 33% of the leagues. If you have Eno Benjamin, or if he's on the waiver wire, he is a must start this week. That is a real smash matchup there going up against Seattle. Like it a lot. So I'm trying to play Eno if I've got him over a lot of people. As you can see, I have him ranked 13th. So really, really good matchup this week. Then let's move on to the stocks where I had an NA due to whoever I put up here last week must have gotten injured maybe. I don't recall who I put up here. Or didn't play. Maybe an Alvin Kamara was up here. Did he play? What happened to my accent? Okay, I don't know. So we're going to start off with Kareem Hunt, who I have at 24. The ECR on him is 24 going up against New England. So if you don't have some of those high-end waiver wire pickups that have come across over the last couple of weeks, I think that they're still possible, and Kareem Hunt is one of your better backs there. Both the ECR and myself are saying just to trust it this week. Again, not a bad option to go with. And then Melvin Gordon, I have him at 21. The ECR on him is 17, so I'm a few spots behind him. There is a Saturday practice report to make sure to catch this today, coming out at some point, maybe by the time I have this video out. So check that out. If you need, check out somebody's analysis on that situation. If he's still listed as questionable, there should be some sort of extra analysis from like beat reporters or something as to the likelihood that will come out from post-practice interviews. So just look for that and to gauge how likely it is that Melvin Gordon will play. But I did provide some options, some backup options if you would like to see those as far as what you're looking at for potential waiver wire replacement options for Melvin Gordon at the last second and playing up against the Los Angeles Chargers. So let's move on to the scraps where I had mixed results last week. And we're starting off with Najee Harris, who I have 3 spots ahead of behind the ECR. I have ranked at 25th. The ECR on him is 22nd. He is being started in 75% of leagues. I struggle to imagine that at this point in the season, Najee Harris owners shouldn't have picked up some of these waiver wire options that have come through. So if you can sit him going up against Tampa Bay this week, not a super juicy matchup. The only thing that tempts me to put him in the 24 is that he got that plate removed in his shoe, so maybe he's a little bit more efficient in the running game, which could go a long ways, to be fair. Then Ezekiel Elliott, I have 2 spots behind the ECR. I have at 28th. The ECR on him is 26th. Not sure why this one made the cut. He is being started in 54% of leagues going up against Philadelphia. I think that's why he made the cut here for the most part, was the start percentage. If you can find a way to sit Zeke, you should. Not a great matchup there against Philadelphia. DFS value play for the running backs that I have this week. Darrell Henderson made it into the list twice here. He's super, super cheap. So I wanted to put other names, but he was the clear choice. If you do want to see other names, I really do like my projections up on the website, www.theffwatch.com. You can find ceiling plays, and I really like to use those, especially in conjunction with the thermostats on the players to find those DFS surprise cheap plays. Then let's move on to the wide receivers for week 6. I'm almost a week ahead of myself. For these steals, I did good last week. I think I went 1 for 1 because I swear I had Isaiah McKenzie in here. So I must have hit on my other one. So Isaiah McKenzie, I have ranked 35th this week. The ECR on him is a little bit higher than it was last week. I have him almost exactly where I had him last week. But the ECR on him is 48, so I'm 13 spots higher than him. So as far as a flex wide receiver 3, I think he's a go if you're comparing him to some players around this area going up against Buffalo. So just a lot of upside. Of course, not the greatest. No, he's not going up against Buffalo. What was wrong with me last night? Isaiah McKenzie's on Buffalo going up against Kansas City, so that is a good matchup. Moving on to Jakobi Meyers, I have ranked at 22nd. The ECR on him is 30, so I'm 8 spots ahead. I have him in starting territory. The man has played elite ball so far this season. It's a small sample size, sure, but none of the other sample sizes aren't small, being 2 games larger than his best case scenario. So, going up against Cleveland, limited amount of options, but that doesn't really matter a whole lot to these New England receivers because really it's the same with the Cleveland receivers. They run, and then they get you with the big plays. So it's really bigger plays that make up a lot of the receptions on these teams, so they make up a little bit for a lack of volume. But Jakobi Meyers also has volume. He's getting targeted at a very high rate, some 31%, I believe. My projections absolutely loved him, had him at 6 for my projected rankings, and his ceiling's as high as anybody's. He's pretty much a must start. I just like you trying to put him into your starting lineup, It feels dirty. But man, I mean, I don't know that it's not real. Jakobi Meyers has been like on the fringe of being really good for a couple of years now, really. And maybe things are coming together. Of course, you want to say like, oh, but the quarterback. But he did it last week with the quarterback. So find a way to get him in your lineup if you can. And just put some faith into it. Moving on to the stocks, which I had mixed results last week. I have Allen Lazard at 24. The ECR in him is 23. He's only being started in 38% of leagues, going up against the New York Jets. Once again, I could see this game going in so many different directions, good or bad for all the positions. I do think there will be an emphasis on the running game from Green Bay. I think they have a smart enough coaching staff to realize that they lost last week's game in the play calling department to a fair degree. I mean, offense could have done better and scored like at any point in the second half would have been helpful. But ultimately, they just run that ball more. They probably walk out of there with a win. So I do believe they will recognize that. And we'll say that's the reason that I'm one spot behind ECR. He should be probably started at more than 38% of leagues. Same with, Brandon Ayuk, especially in a 3 wide receiver league. I'm saying he's pretty much a must start here, having him at 29, 4 spots ahead of the ECR at 33, going up against Atlanta. We've talked about that San Francisco matchup a couple of times now, so we won't do that again. But I have him, he's being started in 18% of leagues. He can probably be started in at least, let's get that up to the Allen Lazard-ish range there. Not a bad play this week. Moving on to the scraps for the wide receiver position, I have Jalen Waddle ranked 25th. The ECR in him is 18. People are rightfully afraid to be putting these Miami guys too far back. I have Tyreek Hill a little ways back as well. But, don't be afraid to sit Waddle if you have some good options, if you have a Jakobi Meyers. So I have him 7 spots behind the ECR, going up against Minnesota too this week. So I get it. It all looks good, but there may be some better than good options out there. Going back a step here, I did good with my scraps last week. Then on to Romeo Doubs, who I have ranked 38th, 6 spots behind the ECR and at 32nd, going against the New York Jets. We've talked about that matchup. Also, it's funny how matchups seem to find their ways onto these lists a fair bit so far in my experience. And so, Romeo Doubs, for a 3 wide receiver league, he is a good flex option. 2 wide receiver league, I gotta think that between running backs and wide receivers, you have a better option out there that you could go with. But there is some upside to this matchup. So not the worst case scenario. I'm just not expecting a big week from him, but it could happen. And part of this too is just that the actual upside in the projections, which just wasn't quite there in this matchup for him for whatever reason. Then the DFS value play that I have this week is Rondale Moore. It's pretty darn cheap, and there's a pretty darn good high ceiling for him. So those are my goes. DFS value plays. We'll just wrap up with that. Was Rondale Moore for the wide receiver, Darrell Henderson in at running back, Zach Wilson at quarterback, and for the DFS value plays, Dawson, for the tight ends, I should say, Dawson Knox I have as the better option, but Daniel Bellinger as a good option if you want to go even cheaper and save a few extra dollar bills, y'all. So that's it for this Saturday special. Once again, rankings will get updated usually Saturday night, Sunday morning. I look at them a couple times depending on news that comes out or any podcast that I happen to listen to throughout the day here. But I want to get my Saturday going. So I will see you all. You can come visit me live answering start-sit questions, or you can drop them in the comments if you wish, and I'll try to get to them 1 hour before kickoff here on the channel. Bye-bye. Peace out.